Over to you, Kavi sir.
Thank you very much. Hi, my name is Kavi Arya. I'm a professor in the Computer Science Department of IIT Bombay, and I'm also the principal investigator of eYantra. So I'd like to welcome you today to this little program where we have two esteemed guests with us. And the purpose of this program is to animate the discussion around the eYantra Innovation Challenge, for which the registrations are on now until the 29th of September. But before that, let me just tell you what the purpose of this entire exercise is and what eYantra is about in just a few brief words. So eYantra is an technology outreach project hosted at IIT Bombay, funded by the Ministry of Education. And it is trying to empower many, many students across the country in engineering colleges, polytechnics, and so on. And it does it through three initiatives it has. One initiative is called the eYantra Lab Setup Initiative, which sets up labs in an engineering college in order to change the culture of a college to one of innovation and entrepreneurship. You know, students believe, even now, that if you just pass exams, you'll get a job. That's not the case anymore. Employers and the world is looking for much, much more than just an employee who has to be told what to do. They are looking for young people who are entrepreneurial, who are curious, who are willing to pick up interesting problems to solve, who are problem solvers, who are entrepreneurial in the way they engage with life, whether it's inside an organization or outside an organization. So that kind of animal, if you like, for want of a better word, eYantra tries to create by complementing our education system with problem-based learning, project-based learning, all these kind of things. So the lab is a very important component of that. Along with the lab, we have two competitions whose purpose is to train students. These are not pure competitions where we just assess your preparedness in a subject or a topic. These competitions are MOOCs. They actually train you in skills, okay, over a period of 6 months. So one competition is the eYantra robotics competition, which trains you in technology stacks. One stack, for instance, could be how to build and fly a drone. Another stack could be geographical information systems as to how to make sense of Google Maps and do mapping-based applications. Another could be a control system stack where we teach you complex controls, how to balance a motorbike, right? 3D built, a 3D modeled bike, which you balance and then you negotiate around an arena. Another could be chip design, where we train you how to program field programmable gate arrays, which is reconfigurable hardware using languages like Verilog. So we train you in technology, and the outcome we find from data is that students get placed at almost 50 to 100% higher salaries than people who don't have this experience. Students are encouraged to do higher degrees, which is very good, or students spontaneously do startups or join startups, right, which we are very happy about. So it really changes the culture. So the robotics competition trains you in basic technology skills. And then the eYantra Innovation Challenge, trains you how to use technology to solve societal problems. And in the process, we train you how to look for an interesting problem, and then how do you solve the problem by building a proof of concept, a POC, and then we teach you how to pitch this to an incubator. So it's an end-to-end kind of training that eYantra gives you. Now, what is this all about? For this, I will hark back to the G20 session that we curated on the 18th of August at the G20 summit in Varanasi on the invitation of the Ministry of Youth Affairs. So in our 75-minute session on the future of work and job creation, we essentially told this story, that technology and automation is going to reduce legacy jobs in all spheres, in manufacturing, software, copywriting, media, and so on. They're going to reduce jobs. So what do we do? So we said that the Indian economy is growing exponentially. There are lots of opportunities if you have the appetite for them. And there are opportunities in various fields like manufacturing, like healthcare, like software and agriculture and all sorts of things, right? But those jobs need a different mindset. And eYantra creates that mindset. And we had a guest there, a friend who's the co-founder of Sahyadri Farms, which is a 1,000 crore agricultural business in Nasik. And Azhar Tambuwala showed all the opportunities that exist in agriculture. Similarly, today we have two very esteemed guests of ours who will populate two areas for us to give you an idea of the kind of innovation that you can do in these areas. And we are hoping that the students who listen to these two speakers of ours will be inspired to look for interesting problems to solve, which can result in proofs of concept, which can result potentially in startups, or at least some interesting research that they can do, or BE projects, or what have you. So I'd like to introduce Professor Vinod Menon and Sriram Parthasarathy here. And I'd like to introduce them both first before asking them some questions which would be useful to you.
Is Kavi sir audible?
I think he has got
He went off.
disconnected.
Yeah.
Yes. He's back. Yeah. Kavi, you're back. You're muted.
So we lost you for.
You're muted.
We lost you for 2 minutes.
No, what is this?
We lost you for 2 minutes.
Okay, fine. I'm back now. Okay.
Yeah.
So essentially, we have Professor Vinod Menon here with 37 years of professional experience in training, research, and consulting, where he's specialized in disaster, risk reduction, climate change adaptation, public policy analysis, and all that for the last 25 years. He's a UN staff member. He's a founding member of the National Disaster Management Authority of India. And he had the status of a Union Minister of State in that. He's a regional director for Asia at the International Emergency Management Society in Oslo. And he's an adjunct prof at Amrita University and an advisor to the School of Sustainable Development. And he's got a number of other credits like this to himself. He's a governing board member of Swayam Shikshan Prayog, and he's a member of many advisory boards. But more importantly, he's a good friend of e-Yantra. He's a personal friend. And we had a wonderful time a few years ago when we took him to Bhutan with us and a bunch of other experts to investigate whether young people without any exposure to these kind of ideas could be exposed to disaster management ideas over a few days and then come up with innovative resolutions to them. And that 3-day workshop showed us that there's a lot that young people can do. So you're only limited by your imagination. So that's Professor Vinod Menon. Then Sriram Parthasarathy is an interesting guy. He's a banker originally, and he's been a banker with Barclays, ANZ, Standard Chartered, and he's been the country head of a German bank, West LB, at one time. So, and after that, after almost 16 years in banking, he went into agriculture. And he's got 13 years of extensive experience in the agricultural sector from 2010 to 2020. And he himself was a farmer for 3 years, where he was an entrepreneur building farm to fork supply chain for fruits and vegetables for almost about 5 years. And he specialized in perishable fruits and vegetables. And he's got wide experience, but broadly in finance, where he's been a specialist in project finance, and he's been one of the leading financiers in the telecom, energy, mining, and all these sectors. And in agriculture, he's got a deep understanding of the agricultural sector in India. So he's someone who's got corporate experience, finance experience, and agricultural experience at the grassroots level. So I thought it would be great for him to join us to give an idea of the kind of opportunities that exist. So we'll start with the Professor Menon. So Professor Menon, we have 10 minutes or whatever here. I thought that you could give us an idea of what young people, like who we have here is faculty and students from engineering colleges, right?
I'll call you back.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
So, we have faculty and students from engineering colleges, and they would be very interested to understand what they can do at their level with the kind of skill sets that they have, with the kind of training that they have, aided and abetted by the training that we give them, in exploring opportunities in disaster management. That means what kind of ideas, what kind of opportunities exist in doing some innovation to help this disaster management area with the kind of skills that they have, which is software, web, embedded systems, Internet of Things, and GIS, and all those kind of things. So over to you, Vinod.
Thank you very much. Actually, for the faculty members and students of engineering from different institutions in India, from the IITs, NITs, engineering colleges, and also other technical institutions. I'm actually very fond of the initiative which Professor Kavi Arya and his team, e-Yantra, has been doing after I came into contact with him and the team 4 years ago. And I feel that actually the challenge is to really look at the problems and look at solutions using information technology tools. And we have seen that enormous potential exists in trying to look at IT solutions, information technology solutions, especially using IoT or embedded systems or GIS solutions and many others, including artificial intelligence now, because we are seeing the whole game of problem solving is actually changing with artificial intelligence solutions also. So I think when you really look at disaster management, the bottom line of disaster management is that anything can happen anytime, anywhere. And we know that right now, while we're talking, the people in Morocco faced a very devastating earthquake. And we saw that in Derna, in Libya, there was a devastating flood which happened, and then 2 dams have burst, and then an entire city of Derna has actually faced huge devastation. So these kind of challenges are happening, and then you have conflicts happening in Sudan and many other countries in Africa, and also in Europe. We have seen a lot of refugee movements of people trying to find, asylum in other countries, basically in search of jobs, in search of employment and income, and so on. So when you look at disaster management, it's essentially disasters, climate change induced hydrometeorological disasters, extreme events, or even conflicts. So what are the solutions possible? You know that engineering students and engineering firms and entrepreneurs come up with sensors, come up with various solutions using either the chips and R&D in innovative solutions in robotics and many other tools which they're actually using. You also see communication solutions which are being tried through Raspberry Pi and others. And we find that even early warning solutions are possible for all kinds of disasters. And now the United Nations has been talking about early warning solutions for all by 2030. And they have actually put together about $3.8 billion, billion with a B, for solutions in early warning. And when we find that these kind of solutions are possible, if you can actually look at sensors for looking at flood levels or rainfall patterns using artificial, solutions, automatic weather stations, artificial intelligence solutions, machine learning solutions, big data analytics, geoinformatics, and so on. So we have a lot of opportunities. And when we really look at that, I think we have even seen large multinational corporations like Google or IBM or Microsoft or Apple trying to look at problem-solving solutions using tools like Person Finder. When you find people are missing in disasters, in large crowds and things, so that you use Person Finder to use what is called crisis map solutions. And right now there is a huge crowdsourcing solution for mapping using hot OSM, OpenStreetMaps, and so on in Morocco and also in Libya. And we know that even when the MH270, the Malaysian Airlines disappeared, there was also a crowdsourcing initiative where people are all trying to find where is the plane, because this plane went missing. And so there's a huge effort, and we've seen drones being used for looking at wildfires in California or in Greece or in many other countries. So using drones, using geoinformatic solutions, using remote sensing, satellite imagery. The opportunities are endless. And so when we really look at the solutions, like what Professor Kavi Arya said, employment generation is possible if you can have innovative solutions for problem solving, and you can have startup solutions, and there are many incubators. So we have many opportunities. And I think we will be able to take up some of these when we have questions and answers also. I'll pause now, and if there are any questions, we can take it up later.
Thanks, Vinod. That's very good. You kind of laid it out a bit. In the question and answers, we can go into the details maybe of the sorts of disasters and the kind of innovative solutions that can come from people. Now, most students feel that it is some specially endowed people who create all these interesting products and services and all that. But I'd like to remind them that each person has a unique perspective as to how to solve a particular problem, and there's no guarantee that somebody else might have even thought of it. And that's because technology has changed a lot, situations have changed a lot, infrastructure has changed a lot, and there are constantly new opportunities all the time for solving a problem in a manner that was not possible even 3, 4, 5 years ago. Okay, so and people should not underestimate the value that they can bring to solve a problem, because they might have a very unique perspective to it, which might lead to something really special. So I think you started off an interesting line, but we'd like to carry it through later on with talking about specific disasters like, say, floods. Or when we went to Bhutan, you remember Bhutan has got 5,000 glacial lakes. And what's happening, because global warming, climate change is bringing more meltwater down into these lakes, and these lakes are breaching their barriers, and they're flooding entire valleys and villages and stuff like that. So even a very simple solution like putting a depth sensor in a lake and from time to time reporting the depth of the water in the lake can tell you when the water is reaching a dangerously high level, when it might cause a breach. Something like this would be extremely helpful to save lots of lives. Similar things could happen in other places. Flood warning systems in a city like Mumbai. Nobody tells us whether so-and-so area is flooded or not until you actually take your car out and you get stuck. Even in Bombay, we don't have these kind of things. And this might be so in other cities also. So I'm saying that we are only limited by our imagination as to what are the things that we can sense and to bring that together in a kind of a solution. So similarly, so one thing common between disaster management and agriculture is that agriculture is a sphere which has lots of disasters. Right? And farmers know that. And you're a victim of climate. You're a victim of the vagaries of climate. And you need a similar kind of mindset to be able to survive, right? Well, apart from other things, apart from climate, survive agriculture itself. So I was speaking to Sriram a bit earlier on. I said, let us be focused. In fact, he encouraged me. Why don't we be focused about what are the specific things that students can actually help with their current skill set? So I think I'll leave the floor to him to kind of give an idea of what he's got in his mind, of the kinds of problems which could be tackled by students, which are doable and which would cause a lot of benefit to the agricultural community. So it'll be good if you just give an idea from farm to fork, what is the kind of chain, and then from there you can give an idea of what are the kind of things, interventions that we could do. Over to you, Sriram.
Thank you, Professor Arya. It's a privilege to be here with the eYIC team and also to present to the faculty and students from the various colleges from across India. I think eYIC is a very interesting initiative, and happy to be helping along with that. So to cut to the chase, as far as agriculture is concerned, okay, it is a very, very vast area. Okay, in India, agriculture is roughly estimated to be about 18% of the GDP. So in real terms, that is about $600 billion plus of value which is generated from agriculture, right? It is probably larger than most of the other sectors. Agriculture today is probably larger than the IT sector. It is probably as big as the manufacturing sector in India. So it is indeed quite large. But that also means that there is a chance of kind of getting sidetracked into a lot of these challenges that the sector faces and get caught up in the whole process of things that are too complex. So I think what we need to focus on is that the end of the day, this eYantra project is kind of for students from the various engineering colleges. So one of the key things, therefore, is that we need to kind of cut down the problems and the areas in agriculture into bite-sized problems which can be tackled by the students here. So the key thing here is that these have to be problems which can be addressed in the couple of months of limited time that you have, within which you have to kind of develop this project, right? So let me kind of, what I will try to do is outline the range of activities that happen in agriculture and give you a few hints as to what people can focus on. So agriculture broadly, we talk about the farming process, the pre-farming process, as in what happens when you have to kind of prepare the land and soil for the farming process itself, which also includes understanding the soil components, whether there is water, what are the kind of fertilizers that need to be added, what kind of farm mechanization needs to be used to kind of prepare the soil. So all of that comes under the pre-farm process. Then is the phase of farming itself, where the farmer kind of plants various agricultural crops, whether it is food grains, whether it's fruits and vegetables, and then harvests the produce. Okay. Then is the post-harvest process, where once the produce is harvested, how is it transported from the farm to the various markets, which are also called as mandis in India? And from there, how is it stored? How is it transported? How does it get to the processors? How does it get to the customers? So that is the whole agricultural chain. And within this, there are numerous problems that can be addressed to solve some of the problems. Now, remember one thing, when we talk about problems in agriculture, it is not only the problems faced by the farmer. That's very important to understand, because the moment we talk about agriculture, everyone starts thinking farmer. What also happens is that you need to focus on the problems that happen after the produce leaves the farm till it gets to the consumer. In India, that's one of the areas where there is a huge challenge. And because if the value is not preserved through that chain till the produce gets to the customer, the farmer will never get the price for that. So it is also important to preserve the value of the produce after it leaves the farm, so that some part of the value can also go to the customer through a better price and or a lower price and better quality to the customer, and a better price to the farmer. So we need to kind of look at the whole range of activities and break it down into small bits which can be solved here. Now, that's all the theory part of it. Now, let me give you some examples of what are the kind of problems that can be addressed here. And look, there are a number of these problems which may have already been solved, but I think what this process entails, this eYantra process, is encouraging students to innovate, think in different ways, and create solutions, right? So even if there is a solution which already exists, what students here could also do is take the solution which exists and adapt it for a local use in your community or around your community, state, wherever it can be applied, right? So let me give you an example. So, this I was talking to Kavi Arya earlier, and one of the things that we talked about is way back in around 2010, 2011, when I was doing farming, there already, and smartphones were not even in wide use at that stage. People had already innovated to create solutions. Like, for example, what happens in the rural areas is that the place where the farmer lives might be some distance away from the actual farm, right? The water pump for the farm might be maybe a couple of kilometers away from the farmer's house. And what happens is that, let's say he has to kind of switch on the water in the farm. Every time he has to keep going up and down. So there was actually a solution at that time where you had a small device fitted to the pump, and you kind of give a missed call on that and put a particular code, punch in a particular code. This is the feature phones, not even the smartphones. You punch in a particular code and the pump will start. And you call the same number and punch in a different code, the pump will shut down. So these kind of solutions existed even in the pre-smartphone era. So I'm sure similar things can be adapted to the users in today's environment as well. But one of the, again, this I should have mentioned earlier, but one of the key things relating to innovation is that understanding who is the person you are innovating for. Do not start with the technology, or do not start with the equipment first. Always look at who is this that you are solving the problem for. Talk to them. Understand what is the exact problem. And through that, you might actually learn that the way to address that problem could be completely different from the way you thought. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of talking to your stakeholder or your customer, as they say. I kind of, I was a banker for 16 years, and then I kind of did farming and started my entrepreneurial. But believe me, the amount I learned from my talking to my customers, that actually helped me reshape my entire business and make it more acceptable to the customer. So let me kind of emphasize that again, saying that talk to the people around you. So coming back to the solutions, there are all kinds of solutions. Let's say, one of the things that people talk about is India needs a lot more cold chain, right? But then cold chain is expensive. Can everyone kind of, put up a cold store and stuff like that? These cost a couple of lakhs of rupees. So there is already a solution, but there is absolutely no harm in you guys kind of trying this as well. There was during the days I was farming, again, this is 2010, 2011, I came across a farmer, Indian Punjabi farmer in the US, who had created a device, a small device which bypassed the thermostat in the room air conditioner, because a normal room air conditioner will not cool down the temperature below 16 to 17 degrees. Whereas if you wanted to use it as a cold in a cold store, you need to bring it below 10 degrees, maybe even 5 or 6 degrees. So what he had done is that used a device to bypass the thermostat in the normal air conditioner, so that it can cool down a small room in a village to maybe 4 or 5 degrees also, right? It's not very complicated. The only thing you need to keep in mind is that how do you bring down the temperature but kind of also manage the frosting issue, right? Simple things like that. These are kind of things. So the first one I kind of talked about, first example of how you switch on and switch off pumps is the pre-farm or during the farming activity, right? Something like this is the supply chain activity, right? Let me give you another example. In, let's say, fruits, okay, you have various fruits, you have, let's take watermelon, right? Now, we all love to eat watermelon, but then how do you know whether a watermelon is ripe or not? We all like a ripe red watermelon, but sometimes you also end up with a white one if it is not fully ripe. How do you ensure that the watermelon that you're purchasing or the farmer is selling to the wholesale market and the which the local vendor is buying from the wholesale market is fully ripe? Now, what typically happens is that the farmer takes the watermelon and taps it like this, and it produces a certain sound. And based on that, they estimate whether it is ripe or is it going to be hard, right? What does that indicate? It indicates that if there is a slightly hollow sound, that means the fruit has ripened. If it is hard from inside, that means you will get a slightly hard sound. Now, can you use a small device like a which you transmits a sound or a ultrasound, something, a small torch-like device, which when you kind of ping it on a particular fruit, whether it could be a watermelon, it could be a mango, it could be any other, and the right and it will determine whether it is ripe, the fruit is ripe or not. Obviously, understanding that the kind of sound and the skin thickness in a watermelon is different from, say, a chiku or a mango. So you need to kind of make adjustments for that, because what that will do is that it will help both the farmer sell his produce and the customers get a better quality produce, right? And therefore create value along the chain. So there are simple solutions like this, which students can think about and develop. But even if you could have just take a walk around the market and you see how customers behave, go to the wholesale market in your respective town, see how people buy and how the trade happens, talk to the farm people who come there to sell the produce, talk to the traders in the wholesale market, talk to the street side vendors, customers. You'll get a whole lot of ideas in terms of what are the things that can be done. And I'm telling you, in terms of, these are basic ideas which are good to develop as projects in a student environment. But that aside, there is a lot of innovations which are kind of being done as we speak by various startups in the agricultural sector. So some of those also you could look at and see how you can add value to that. So those are some of the thoughts we can kind of talk about more in the Q&A session.
Thanks, Sriram, for that. I think this is a nice way that we've got. We are also on time in the way we wanted to play this out, and we wanted to give some time for question and answers. So, like you said, right, in this whole space of vegetable storage, right? So you said the innovative ways to bring the cost down of these cold rooms by doing jugaad with ACs. It's like doing jugaad with upright washing machines to make lassi in Punjab, which the Punjabis also discovered,
Absolutely.
right? And there's so much to be done. In fact, I have a colleague, Professor Arora in IIT Bombay, who's been working on this whole area of onion storage. If you have a single bad onion in your store, it can spoil the rest of the thing because it lets out ethylene gas or whatever it is. So they've been looking at ways and sensors which they can plant in onion storage barns so as to assess when the onions are beginning to spoil. And that can save your entire harvest that you've got there, right? So onion storage, and for that matter, any storage of any vegetables or fruit or produce or whatever it is, right? So storage is one idea. Transportation, right? Transporting them and checking ripeness. I think this is very interesting. In fact, I've often seen a coconut vendor knocks on the nariyal in order to check how thick the malai is or whether it's water or whatever it is. And I'm sure that by the weight of the coconut, he can sense whether it has got lots of water or little water because the fiber is very light around it. And by knocking it, he can see what the thickness of the malai inside it. So I've often thought about doing some investigation into this. And if people are near a village which processes lots of coconuts, that's a great place to devise some machine learning algorithms. Because they normally break these coconuts to extract the water or the fiber or whatever it is. And if they are processing a large number of coconuts, these guys can do an estimate of the amount of water and malai and all that in these things and build up a lot of data with which they can do machine learning algorithms, which can be extremely useful. The other thing is grading. Grading is very important in mandis.
True.
Right? Sorting vegetables based on color, on size, and these kind of things. These are very easily done with the help of very basic mechatronics or embedded systems with devices. In fact, I remember in my embedded systems course, students used our Firebird robot to do a prototype. In just 4 weeks, they built a prototype which can sort lemons, yellow lemons, green lemons. So you have a hopper and they drop lemons down into a bin, and then you have a webcam which is doing OpenCV image processing. Based on that, they will have a paddle which can move the lemon into one bin or the other. In fact, I'd like Lohit here, who's our PhD student, talk about a little bit about the work that he's doing. So he's doing pest attack prediction in chili plants, right? Using satellite data and local sensors and those kind of things. So this pest prediction is very important. Okay, and pest spraying people are already doing with drones and stuff like that. But remote sensing of various kinds with drones, and in fact, a colleague of mine from ISRO, Tapan Mishra, he's the father of SAR, synthetic aperture radar, which are these big radars carried in satellites with which they do radar imaging of the Earth, through which they can check things like plantations of various kinds and various other things on the surface of the Earth. Now he's retired from ISRO and he's got a startup in West Bengal where he's making small SAR radars which are drone bound, right? So he can now fly a drone and at a fraction of the cost get very high resolution imagery of agricultural fields. So these are the kind of things that are beginning to happen now because technology is advancing so fast. High and powerful processing is becoming cheaper and cheaper. So you're just limited by your imagination.
True. In fact, a lot of these things exist. In fact, there is a Bangalore-based company called Cropin. What they do is that one of the things that's also been happening over the years is that the cost of satellite imagery has been coming down significantly. Satellite images are a lot cheaper. So what they do is use satellite imagery, and they have trained their algorithms to identify, and using past historical data, and they've got machine learning algorithms which now are able to look at these satellite images and identify on a particular geotagged farm what is being grown, what stage is this crop in. Is this the early stage, mid stage, late stage? Is the crop growing based on the quality of the crop good, medium, bad? Is there any pest infestation? All of these can be identified from a satellite image using machine learning. And this is kind of being used by corporations across the world. They kind of actually have more global customers than customers in India. In India also they have a lot of customers, but this kind of stuff is already happening, and this is cutting edge stuff, right? The thing is that I didn't want to kind of mention all of this in the context of the students, because that kind of takes them on a completely tangential kind of a thing. And whereas I think we need to kind of give them bite-sized chunk of what robotic devices that they could work with.
No, Sriram, I think this is very useful. I'll tell you why. Because we've had instances where, see, in this eYantra Innovation Challenge, it is a faculty mentor which works with 3 or 4 students, right,
Right,
to
right.
come up with an innovation. We've had one faculty, his name is Rohan Vaidya in Vincent Pallotti College in Nagpur.
Mhm.
He, in working with the students to come up with an innovative idea for the eYantra Innovation Challenge, they came across an interesting problem, which now he's picked it up as his PhD problem. So now
Right.
he's pursuing his PhD based on that problem. So I'm saying
Fantastic.
that this whole process
Hmm.
of identifying interesting problems to solve is where the value is created in society.
Right.
It's the people who own the problem who actually make the money. Because it is
True.
Apple, for instance. The problem with India is that most of our software company are realizing other people's dreams, right? And they own
Mhm.
the intellectual property. We are just building it out for them. So ours is
Right.
low margin work. They actually own the IP and they are making high margins. So we want our students to be able to look at problems as opportunities and build the
True.
technology themselves. And I'd like to remind them that our study and our experience shows that anything that you build in India, you can build at one eighth of the cost that it could be available for abroad. So that's a fantastic, even if you find that a product exists abroad, if you build an Indian version of that, which is good for our Indian applications, you can build it for one-eighth of the cost, and you'll find not only an Indian market, but you'll find an African market, in fact, the global South will buy it from you,
In
right?
fact, a lot of the innovators from India, they actually kind of, find that it is a lot easier to sell overseas and get better revenue
Yes.
than within India. And like, for example, this company I mentioned, Cropin, right? They initially kind of they today kind of get a lot more revenue from, because once you've solved the problem, which in Indian context, you're kind of pretty much able to kind of use it anywhere across the globe.
In fact, we are trying to leverage eYantra as a global platform by going global and using this as a platform to connect Indian kids with kids abroad. Hopefully, that will lead to startups with people from here, people from there. We want to bring them to IIT Bombay for internships and get them to know each other and
Wish you
all
all the
that kind of
best.
stuff. Because I think this is the software companies are making the money from abroad. Indian markets are very difficult to crack, right? And if you have a good product, I think it's a good idea to look at exporting abroad. In fact, one of our eYantra startups, Catamaran Robotics, and founded by Muthu Vangalyapan and other co-founders, is a robotics company based out of Coimbatore. They have 115 engineers. And Muthu came up through the eYantra robotics competition. Then he came through an internship, and we said, Muthu, don't take a job, do a startup or go for a higher degree. He actually did a startup, and he sells security robots to condominium societies in Singapore. 50 condominium societies have his robots, right? Where his value proposition is that you have 10 security guards, we can do the work with 6, and the work of 4 will be done by my robots. And he has a control room in Coimbatore, which is monitoring those campuses in Singapore. He's got delivery robots in 7-star hotels, which autonomously take luggage from the lounge right up to the person's room by autonomously controlling the elevator, getting into the elevator, getting off at the right floor, and going to the room. So I'm saying that we are just limited by our imagination. Our students don't know that very often. If they can apply their mind to it and believe they can do it, I'm certain that they will be able to do it and they'll get all the help from us that they want. So I'd like to open the floor here to the audience, and people on YouTube can perhaps comment on the chat, and we have about 10-15 minutes to answer your questions. It'll be very good to hear from you, and we are open to questions.
Yeah, if you have any questions, please do ask in the chat box. If you want to ask question, you can raise your hand. I'll unmute you. By default, everyone is on mute. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand.
I think
Or
this
you
is
can
by
just
default. We can unmute everybody now, no?
we can, but since we are going live, we'll like to.
Okay.
Because there are other few doubts with
Yes,
regard to
yes,
eYIC, I
yes.
guess.
So if they just put it on the chat, I think that's a good start.
Yep.
So while they are warming up with their questions and all that, I'd like to get back to Vinod Menon. So we did a 3-day disaster workshop at the College of Science and Technology in Funcholing 4 years ago, and that's when we met Vinod. And we wanted to go there to see what e-Yantra can do to Bhutanese students. So we asked the Bhutanese, what is the most important problems that you face? And they said disasters, because whenever it is monsoon every year, they get landslides, and then the country is disconnected because most of the traffic goes by road. And from Funcholing to Paro and Thimphu and all that, it gets very difficult to travel. So the students came up with amazing solutions, right? They came up with the solutions like putting optical fiber in the roadsides of the mountains in stretches which are prone to landslides. And they say that by monitoring the light signal at two ends of an optical fiber cable, if the cable bends a little bit, right, that can be detected at the sensor at the other end, and it warns you that there's some movement happening which is not good. Okay, various ideas like that. Some people came up with an idea of cattle monitoring because they believe that animals they can sense earthquakes and things like that before they happen. So if you monitor animals, that can be an early warning system for you, right? Which is a very innovative idea actually. And the Japanese, I think there are some patents out for this kind of technology. So someone is asking here, Siddharth Jain, what key problems are common with agriculture as well as disaster management? Now, this is a smart guy. He says, I want to build a solution which is useful for both disaster management and agriculture. Any ideas, Vinod? Things
Okay, I was just thinking about that when Sriram was talking, because in Maharashtra we used to have cut flowers which are being sent for auctions in Europe. Okay, and always the problem was that how do you really make sure that the cut flowers can actually reach in time sensitive in air traffic, and also transit across different cities and then reach a certain place, and what's the kind of uh, you know uh, trucking which is required, where we will actually be able to make sure that the flowers don't really start wilting when it is actually moving from one location to Mumbai, and then from Mumbai it's actually airborne and then going into another city and so on. This is one problem in terms of containerizing. The other issue is in terms of warehousing, as was already mentioned, and also the question of preparing for drought situations when water becomes really scarce. When rainfall becomes scanty, what is the kind of preparedness which is possible? So how do you really anticipate a long drawn drought situation which can actually be harmful for livestock as well as for human beings and for crops? So what are the kind of solutions which are possible? So weather patterns and looking at all this, and I think if you really look at the age composition of the population, there are people who are actually elderly, there are people who are young, there are people who are actually also women who are dependent on the farms. So what is the kind of solutions which actually can be possible to make sure that they are actually able to withstand shocks, whether it is economic shocks like sudden rise of prices, and then like petrol, when the Russian war in Ukraine actually started having impact in terms of a global change in the petroleum prices, and because of the shortage and so on. So what are the kind of solutions which are possible, both in terms of making sure that you have shortage which has to be addressed, and then if there is a shortage, it's a supply driven kind of a solution which has to be also seen as a demand driven opportunity. If there is a shortage which is going to happen, are the people going to anticipate sudden rise in prices and then start hoarding materials, including vegetables and fruits and so on, especially if there is an impending conflict and things are going to be missing, food grains for instance. When we know that the war in Ukraine has actually upset food grain marketing from Ukraine, because Ukraine has been one of the major storehouses for the European countries for supply of food grains. So these are all possibilities which we may need to really look at. And I think, we also need to really look at whether you mentioned this question of using SAR, synthetic aperture radars, and you mentioned Tapan is actually doing drone-mounted SAR equipments. So there are these synthetic aperture radars which are actually persistent scatterer interferometry using synthetic aperture radars, what is called Pearson SAR. There are also differential SARs, D INSAR, and also we have what is called normal INSAR, which is the interferometric synthetic aperture radars. What it does is that it is able to anticipate the deformations which can be caused before a disaster, during a disaster, and after a disaster. Like you have this floods in Libya, which were caused and resulted in 2 dams which were breaking. Okay, so if you actually can look at the satellite imagery before the event, satellite imagery during the event, and satellite imagery after the event, you might actually have some better analysis.
Useful. Why give such difficult problems? कुछ आसान problem नहीं है इसमें.
The आसान very simple.
These are
very
interesting. They need a lot of data and it's slightly research grade also.
No, very simple problems can be using rainfall data and then seeing whether a river is likely to have flooding or a dam is likely to start crossing this danger signal, danger mark, and then water has to be released. And if water has to be released, how do you make sure that this water is actually not going to inundate agricultural fields and then villages, and then they get destroyed, they get damaged, and infrastructure gets damaged. So I think we need to really look at sensors, how sensors will be able to look at some of these problems. So if in a lake, which is actually a water body, can you really look at the BOD, the oxygen, which is actually there, which is for the aquatic, marine or aquatic beings like fish, or those kind of solutions? Can you really look at remote monitoring using wireless sensors, wireless linked sensors? So these are some of the simple solutions. And similarly, like you mentioned about floods in Mumbai, can we really look at monitoring areas which are likely to get inundated when there is unprecedented rainfall, like what happened in 2005 in Mumbai, or what happened in Chennai in 2010? Can we really look at monitoring rainfall patterns at hyper-local weather and then find solutions? So these are possibilities.
Yeah. If I can add, if it is okay, Kavi, if I can add to that without taking too much, the thing common between disaster management and agriculture is where disaster strikes agriculture, there is a loss of crop. And when there is a loss of crop, there is a farm insurance which gets triggered. And I think the current farm insurance mechanisms are a complete disaster, right? Nothing seems to be working. And the reason that it isn't working is that when, let's say, for example, a crop is destroyed or shortfall of rain, it needs to be verified. Okay, now this farm is in the middle of some taluka, in some district, in some village, somewhere, right? How do you verify that? The trick is that how do you kind of get technology using sensors, satellite data to verify that is where the intersection of disaster management and agriculture can happen. Right now, what happens for agricultural insurance is that there is a person who has to physically go to that area and check how much of the crop has been destroyed, what is the yield, etc. Now, where there is a person involved in the rural areas, it always becomes subjective. What happens then? The politics comes in. Either the political leader in that area kind of influences the person to kind of declare a disaster which is greater than what actually happened, or the insurance companies will tell him to kind of cut it down. So neither party is happy. But if we can develop a technological solution which uses satellite data plus distributed sensors across the region to combine with the weather data and use data processing and machine learning to kind of identify patterns through which we can predict this, that would be a fantastic solution.
Right. Actually, crop insurance is a parametric solution which is attempted based on rainfall parameters. But you actually can come up with solutions which can look at helping the farmer in advance by looking at the data of not only rainfall but also the susceptibility of that particular farm to have excess rainfall, which can happen again based on contours, again based on the geomorphology, the hydromorphology, the cropping pattern which is there. Is it a water intensive crop or is it a low water intensive crop? Is it dependent on rainfall totally? So these are some of the parameters which may also come in.
Vinod, this is very interesting, and I think I'll invite Lohit here to say a bit, because I think he's working in this space. Lohit, this might be a good idea for you to perhaps even guide a few teams to come up with some interesting innovations, because this is what is interesting, that you have microclimate models, so you can know what the climate is in a particular farm. Because our farms are very small, they are about 1-2 acres and stuff like that. The satellite imagery is very coarse. It covers 1 pixel, could be 5 acres or more. So Lohit, do you have anything to say about this?
Yes. So yeah, I think Sriram sir did mention about a company called Cropit. I've been going through that website right now. It's interesting what they're doing, and like rightly said by Kavi sir, that right now the problem with satellite imagery is the spatial resolution, and that is where I'm trying to bridge by introducing some kind of sensing in field, so that will add on to the information that is missing with respect to satellite information. So that's a nice space that one can actually look at, and that's what I'm also looking at currently. So this is just a small problem, as Sriram sir said. It's agriculture. There's a lot of things that you can do in this space, and I'm just trying to address one small issue with the agricultural space itself.
But Lohit, I think the interesting thing here is how to come up with a microclimate model, because that can have impact on many different things, including flood prediction, right? Fine resolution flood prediction. So I think this trying to trace what the effect of rainfall will be on a particular geography is very important, because it can cause a disaster in a, say, village or a town. Like in Pune itself a few years ago, there were very bad floods which destroyed a lot of property. So this whole thing, so someone is asking here, right? Good afternoon, sir. This is Nitish Kumar. Why choose disaster management project? My simple answer is to make lots of money. Right? Because we are looking at opportunities for creating technology, for creating businesses, creating startups which can solve people's problems and ideally make you lots of money. Because if you are making lots of money, obviously the problem is an important one and it's impacting more people. So the more people the problem impacts, the more money you will make. So that is a simple answer to that. But there's also, if you do it in the spirit of, helping society and all that, then that makes your startup or your idea more meaningful and well-intentioned. And so that's my answer to Nitish Kumar. Sujal says that she's pursuing, or is it a he, in EXTC in his third year in St. Francis Institute of Technology. So he's asking whether are epidemic outbreaks typically considered within the scope of disaster management strategies. Over to you, Vinod.
Right. Actually, epidemics and pandemics now, the global pandemic, COVID-19, is a part of what is called chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear emergencies, CBRN emergencies, epidemics, actually, because these are sometimes waterborne or vector-borne diseases actually also can become really an epidemic. Hepatitis B, for instance, or some of these things are actually very important that, you need to really look at early warning. So we have a disease control, a disease surveillance system, which actually can really look at early warning. But sometimes, you find sudden outbreaks happening. Like right now, there is a Nipah virus outbreak in Kerala, where 2 people have died, but there are also few people who have got infected, and there are 950 people have been in the contact of people who are already infected. So which means basically contact tracing becomes important. So epidemiology is actually also early detection and early response is a solution. So how do you really make sure that these early warnings can be detected?
So, Vinod, this is very interesting. I'd like to just highlight this again. Someone just spoke to me yesterday wanting to work with young people to devise a system where they can monitor uptake of drugs through monitoring prescriptions at chemist outlets to know what kind of disease is happening where. Now, if students are interested in this kind of thing, maybe I will connect them to this gentleman, and maybe 4 or 5 teams can be working on this kind of idea. But this whole idea of uh, of predicting and tracking epidemics is a fascinating idea, right? As to how one can do it. One can do it by monitoring hospital records. One can do it by monitoring drugs which are being prescribed in particular areas or wards of a city like Mumbai. There are various indicators of epidemics or things that let you predict epidemics also maybe. Okay, like in pest attack prediction, what they do in agriculture is they monitor humidity, temperature, and pressure. And through machine learning models, you can predict what kind of pests are going to attack your crops and take the appropriate precautions. Because what people do is that they tend to spray pesticides too much. This will let you optimize your spraying of pesticide and so on. So this is a BCom student. I think Meghna Paletti wanted to know about past projects which have been done in this area. I think we look at our records, Lohit. Maybe we can share what are the projects which have been done in the past, which have come to the regionals and the finals, and this can give people ideas. Any other questions before we wind up?
Hello?
So, yeah. Okay. So I think this has been extremely useful. I got a lot out of this interaction today, and I would like to thank both our guests here, Professor Vinod Menon and Sriram Parthasarathy. We are very grateful for the amount of time that they spent with us, and we are grateful for the without hesitation that they come and spend time with us. It is very gratifying, and it's something that we really appreciate. It makes us feel that what we are also doing is meaningful. So we are very hopeful now with this kind of interaction to the kind of outcome that this innovation challenge is going to have. And I'd like to hand over the floor here to my colleagues. I'd like to thank our eYantra team, which is managing the entire show, starting with Lohit, who's leading the charge with the eYantra Innovation Challenge. Lohit is a project staff at eYantra. He's also doing his PhD in this area of agriculture related to what we are looking at. Dr. Veena has joined us recently, and she'll be looking after this next year. So I'd like to hand the floor over to her to give her impression of what she believes has happened today and to wrap up today's program. Over to you, Veena.
Thank you, Kavi sir. So good afternoon to everyone present here. So first of all, I would like to thank a special thanks to Vinod Menon sir as well as Sriram Parthasarathy sir, who accepted our invitation on a short notice and made this interaction happen. So like how when we say about a disaster. So it depends on a person's perspective, basically. So to me, a disaster means immediately the rainfall is something that comes to my mind, the floods and the recent pandemic that happened. So it depends and it varies from person to person. So Professor Vinod Menon, he shedded light on different types of disasters. So we need to think out of the box. And what Sriram Parthasarathy sir mentioned, a strong point that comes to my mind about what he mentioned is, who is the person you are innovating for and for whom you are solving the problem, which students definitely need to apply to their minds before choosing a problem. I hope this interaction would have been so insightful to all the students and the faculties who have joined us. And maybe that they will choose the problem existing in each of these domains. It's not just a theme, there are many problem statements in each of these themes. And special thanks to our Professor Kavi Arya, who took forward this discussion, and many wonderful brainstorming happened through this, and it was so insightful. And thanks to our eYantra team, especially Lohit sir, Deepa, Shri Venkateshwar, who had joined us here, and also to all the other eYantra team members who would have joined on the YouTube live. And thanks to all the participants, especially the students and the teachers who have joined us and have showered your questions here. Please do write to us if you have any further questions to eyic.e-yantra.org, which is the website, and eyic@e-yantra.com. And just reminding you, the registrations for eYantra